Hello there. One of the things that I've been asked to do in this family series is to talk about the fact of sex and physical enjoyment and how God sees that. Well, let me just read you a verse from Ephesians chapter 5, and it says, "For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh." Now that principle, of course, isn't just about physical, because God makes people one. We learn that in the book of Malachi, that God is the one who brings that unity and that union of two into one, as God so designed it to be. But we do have an expression running through Scripture that you maybe would take time to check out for yourself. But the principle of a man knowing his wife, there's an intimacy, and that is a very quaint, I suppose you might say, and a very nice expression that explains the physical intimacy of marriage. The question really was raised, is sexual activity just to produce children, or is it for enjoyment? Well, I suppose we would have to just try and go with what we find in Scripture. It talks about a man nourishing and cherishing his wife. And part of that nourishing and cherishing, and the cherishing part in particular, is to warm her heart, to give her affection, to enjoy the passionate intimacy of a physical relationship. The Scriptures never ever talk about sexual intercourse as anything other than something that is delightful, something that is pleasurable, something that is really for the joy and the delight of the couple involved. If we were to turn to 1 Corinthians and to chapter 7, we find that there is a very clear statement here that a couple must not defraud each other. That is, you cannot refuse physical intimacy except it be by consent, so there's an agreement, for a time, so there's a limited period, and for a spiritual activity to give yourselves to fasting and prayer. But there must be an end to that abstinence. You come together, that Satan tempt you not for your lack of self-control. So the apostle is saying there is an intimacy and there are rights. And in fact, 1 Corinthians 7 verse 4 says the wife has power over not her own body but her husband's, and the husband has power over not his own body but the wife. So the intimacies of physical marriage, within marriage, the physical intimacies give a responsibility, a delight and an ownership, one couple to the other. Now, I would be very reticent to write a rule when it comes to things like contraception. I think one has to be wise. The Scripture teaches that one of the basic reasons for sexual intercourse is to produce children. So children are a delight and a joy, and yet we also know that the practicalities of life would mean that maybe it would be unwise to consistently have children and have a massive family when that is not possible to care for them, to love for them. So you have to take into account other scriptures that teach that a man is responsible to provide for his family. If he doesn't, he's worse than an unbeliever, an infidel. But any person who is really actively against producing children, I would think, would be going against the principle of Scripture, because God told Adam to go forth and to multiply and to replenish the earth. He told him to produce children and to rear families. And we've taught in this series the preciousness of a family and the joy and the delight of children. Children are a joy. So it would be wrong to completely seek to avoid having children. But I think in the light of Scripture it would also be wrong to consistently produce children without any self-control. So whether your form of contraception is in terms of fertility and periods of the month whenever it is less likely to fertilize an egg, or whether you actively use some type of barrier, you have to be wise. You don't want to do something that damages your body. You don't want to do something that is dishonouring to the Lord. And you have to use wisdom in that respect. Now, I hope that covers some of the points that I was asked to deal with. I know it's a touchy subject, it's a sensitive subject, but whatever we do, we must do to the glory of God. We must do out of kindness for the one we love. We must not be manipulative and hard-hearted. We must be prayerful and considerate about how we approach these issues, and there must be joint agreement, as 1 Corinthians chapter 7 would teach, and that cleaving one to another involves and influences every part of our life. I trust that God would bless this teaching to us today.